Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie and I am so glad to be back. It's been a hot minute since I've done a video and I've missed everyone and I've missed doing videos, and there are reasons for it that I'll go over in another video. But today is the promised video about what is going on in my herb garden, what I'm growing for herbs, and a little bit about how I use them. So anyway, let's show you the first one that's up here on my deck, and it's a bit of a surprise to me. It's an experiment that I started, I think it was back in February or March. I did a video on planting them. Let me show you what happened with that. So here we have my ginger plant. Now it's looking pretty sad. It's been outside for a little while, and like I said, I planted this in February or March and left it, and it did not even start coming up until June. I had already given up on it. I kept a little water on it, but I wasn't expecting anything. But they came up in June. They're not very big. I'm really not good at growing things in pots very well. So I'm really not sure exactly what I need to do different to get them to grow larger, but I'm really happy that they're growing. They'll probably come back inside. Well, not probably. They will come back inside when it is winter and when it starts cooling off. And the other surprise is you can even see down here there's a new little one. This one was planted the same time and did not start coming up until August. So this is an August growth, and as you can see there's new growth right now, right down there, this little piece right here. So I will keep these over the winter and see how they look next year. So that's my first herb, is ginger. You can use ginger in many different things. I'm just going to see what happens if this continues to grow, if it lives indoors. And if you have any suggestions on how to grow these, I would love them. The soil that I used is just plain potting mix, and I mixed a little bit of vermiculite in it. And I've been watering them with the fish emulsion over there, and I've put down a little bit of the fruit and citrus fertilizer inside of it. And obviously it's not liking it that much. So anyway, let's move on to the next one. Now over here under my serviceberry is another herb that I've grown for years, and I don't think I'll ever be without it. As a matter of fact, one of the first herbs I ever planted was mint. And this is chocolate mint, and it smells so good. It's a richer kind of, I don't want to say darker, but it's a richer fragrance than regular peppermint. And I absolutely love this in teas. So it's great for teas. You can see that the flowers are absolutely gorgeous. And if we go around here, I've actually had peppermint up through the fence, through the top here. I did pull it out, but it can get pretty tall when it wants to and when it starts flowering. But the flowers are absolutely gorgeous little flowers, and I just let it go. And here's another mint type. This is my spearmint. Spearmint is absolutely another plant that I would never do without. I was scared to death that I had lost this one. There was a huge patch that I've had here since I moved into the house. And when I switched out this area, I cut off the irrigation to it a little bit, and my little spearmint plant died. And it's just recently started coming back. Now the way I control this one, I do plant all my herbs in ground. The way I control this one is I move back the mulch and I go around it and cut out a circle around it and just pull out any runners that go outside the circle where I want to keep it in. And it's stayed contained this way for the 15 years I've lived in this house. Now this one of my very favorite ways to use spearmint besides teas is to slice it up very thinly, chop up some strawberries, mix it with a little tiny bit of balsamic vinegar and sugar. I absolutely love the spearmint with fruit. It's really good. Now when I first bought my house, this little hill here became my herb area. So I have several different herbs along it, and I'm going to highlight a few of those. I've done some videos on these herbs, and I'll link them down at the bottom. This one right here is winter savory. It's in full bloom right now. I don't know if you can see how much the pollinators love it. Winter savory is a great plant to put in soups and stews and pair it with meat. It's kind of a flavor between thyme and, I wouldn't say rosemary, but it's kind of got a stronger flavor than thyme, kind of like rosemary has a stronger flavor. and it's a great herb to use. But it's also a beautiful plant, extremely tough and hardy. I cut it back all the way to the ground, every year. It's a great plant for pollinators. So this is winter savory. Here we have sage. Now there are so many different kinds of sages. There's the regular garden sage, which has a more narrow leaf. We have the tricolor sage, which has a variegated leaf that's absolutely gorgeous that I don't have. We have purple sage, and then this one is Bergartten sage. Now Bergartten sage I use in soups and stews and when I cook my turkeys and stuff like that. And this one actually is semi-evergreen. So even over the winter when things die back, I'll have a few leaves here and there that I can use. They're a little more woody, but they still have the same great flavor. I've never dried this because I always just have some available, but you can dry it. But as you can see with the Bergartten sage, the leaves are much bigger. They're thicker. But they have the same sage flavor as regular garden sage. And there's a little tiny bloom stalk. Every once in a while I'll get little blue flowers off of it. It's really quite pretty. Now this, as you can see, it's a huge plant and it makes an excellent landscape plant. It's beautiful. It's almost impossible to kill. I don't do anything to it. I don't cut it back. I don't fertilize it. It gets a little bit of water and it just does fine. Now right here, I have some oregano. Now I was really surprised. My oregano didn't, usually doesn't have any issues. This year, it did not do what it normally does. What my oregano normally does is I get huge 3 to 4 foot tall, well maybe not 4, 3 foot tall flower stalks. And we did not get the flower stalks this year that we normally do. Now the water did get cut off to it for quite a while when I redid the irrigation, and I think that may have affected it. So I didn't realize that oregano needed as much water as it does. I thought it was a little more drought tolerant. But anyway, it's coming back. This side was usually as full as this side of oregano, and it did die back. It's starting to come back again now that I've got irrigation to it. But oregano, I guess you need to watch the water on it. So oregano, you can definitely dry it. I've dried it before. I use it in, like all your soups and sauces, and there's so many uses for oregano. Very versatile and very easy to grow. Now this is lamb's ear. I don't know if you would count this as an herb in any sense of the form, but you can use this as a poultice. Now I absolutely love the way they look. This one is probably getting, hopefully not too much water. It's yellowing a little bit, but look at the leaves. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. They're very soft, easy to grow. This one went through the drought stress really happily with no issues. And it does need full sun. All of the herbs that I have here, except for the mint, need full sun. The mint needs shade. That's 6, I think. Now here is my little purple sage. This one is one that struggled really heavily with the drought. I think it had more, I think it got drier than all of the other herbs, and I thought I'd lost it. But it's come back. All of these herbs I planted 15 years ago, so they are still alive after 15 years. And this right here, you can see the color. Once it starts getting sun and once it starts filling in again, it'll just be absolutely covered with the new growth that's purple. So I think the purple sage is absolutely gorgeous, and it's the same shape and size as regular garden sage and has the same flavor. So you can use them all the same. Now this one gets huge. You can see back there, this was part of the original plant that died back when the irrigation got cut off. So you can see how big it was. These also get huge and are absolutely gorgeous as a landscape plant. Now, another herb that I grow is yarrow. I just let it reseed itself and grow wherever it wants to grow. This yarrow right here has not received any additional irrigation water. You can see the irrigation line is down below it, so it's not receiving any supplemental water at all. And it just keeps going. I just dug up a plant. I used to go to BYU. That's where I got my landscape management degree. And they had an area where they were ripping out the gardens to build a new building. And I just took a piece out of there, with permission of course. And this is one of my BYU plants. And I absolutely love it. Now, yarrow, I do not use this one medicinally or anything. It is a medicinal plant that you can use. I use it for the pollinators and just for the beautiful little flowers. Also, it's a great lawn substitute, and it's also really good just to grow on your lawns if you don't mind having that texture in there. But I used to have a patch in the lawn down below, but now it's a food forest. So I absolutely love yarrow. Now, I went back and forth on trying to decide whether or not I was going to include any flowering, any flowers as herbs. But I think a lot of people do consider calendula as a medicinal herb. And it absolutely is a gorgeous flower. This calendula gets very little water. It gets whatever comes out of this garden bed, and I have drip irrigation in it, which doesn't overflow. So it gets very little water. And this one reseeded itself from a plant I planted about 10 years ago, and it just every year I get one or two that come up. And I just let the seeds form. This is one of the seeds right here, if we can get it to focus. Just let them drop on the ground and they come up. You can make salves out of calendula, which I have not done, but I've heard they are really great to use. So calendula is another herb that I just let grow, and I let it grow here in the gardens for the pollinators. Now, another fun herb that I'm growing is Stevia. This is actually the Stevia. Let me move over here so you can see both my plants. I have two of them right here. So Stevia, the leaves are so sweet. My kids have loved, well, when they were young, they don't live here anymore, but when they were young, they used to love just to, come grab a leaf of Stevia and chew on it. When you dry them, it gets like 10 times sweeter than the actual fresh leaf. Now, I used to think that having them fresh would give me a ready source of just a good sweetener to use, but they have a very grassy flavor, a very off flavor when you use them dried without distilling them. So I still, if I'm going to use an artificial sweetener, I guess this isn't artificial, but something other than sugar, I buy the Stevia because they've distilled it and the flavor is a lot better. But if in a pinch I ever need, a sweetener like this, I do have Stevia. I just love growing it because it's beautiful. Once it flowers, it hasn't started flowering yet, but you do see the little buds starting there. The pollinators do love it. So Stevia is one that has always been in my garden since I lived in California. So it's been maybe 25 years that I've grown Stevia. It's a great plant. Now, I've done other videos on my rosemary. Yes, this is Utah zone, anywhere between 5 and 7, depending on who you ask and depending on the year. This rosemary has been here for, since, let's see, 2008, I think. It was when I planted it. So, and it did have 1 year where it died back over the winter, and it died back about 2/3. And that year it was an extremely cold winter. I didn't think about watering it at all during the winter, and we had no snow cover. And that was, back in 2012 or so, I think. But it died back. And after that, what I did is number one, if the winters are dry, I remember to come out and water it. And number two is I buried a bunch of stems. You score the bottom of the stem just to rough it up a little bit, tack it down. And so this rosemary is rooted all along its stems, all the way through this area. So if one part of it dies, if the main root dies, then I'll have other offshoots that maybe will live. So to get rosemary to live in Utah, in cold areas, number one, choose a good variety. Now I do have just so I do have another video on growing rosemary, and I will link that at the top and possibly in the description. But to let it grow in a cold area, number one, choose the right variety, which this is ARP. ARP is a cold hardy rosemary. Number two, put it in a sheltered location where it's not exposed to cold drying winds in the winter. And number three, make sure that it gets watered possibly once a month if you have no moisture over the winter. It really helps with snow cover. Snow cover, insulates it and will keep it healthy for every year. So this is a great plant to have, and you can use rosemary in cooking a lot. I use it quite a bit in cooking. I don't dry it because, you know, I always have leaves available. Even over the winter, it's semi-evergreen. Now, I did a video on the herb I love to hate, and this is salad burnett. I think that's 9, this is 10. So salad burnett tastes like cucumber. You can use the young leaves in salad, but it is an extremely hardy plant. As you can see, I did not deadhead it enough, and it's quadrupled in number all over my garden. I have it everywhere now, which is not a problem. It's just that, you know, I don't use it often enough to, you know, dedicate, you know, space to it. So I do like salad burnett, but be careful where you plant it because it will spread, or be sure to remember to deadhead it. As you can see, we have a lot of little flowers here that I have not deadheaded yet. And it doesn't seem to bring in the pollinators. So it's not, you know, the flowers aren't useful for the pollinators. The next one is chives. And I've just recently learned how to dry chives for, so I can make my own ranch dressing mix. And chives are extremely easy to grow. It's another one where you need to deadhead it, otherwise it seeds itself everywhere. And they're really hard to pull out. Here's one of the flowers. The flowers are also edible. Here's one of the seed heads that, you know, I need to get rid of so it doesn't reseed itself everywhere. And right down here is one of the seedlings that I've pulled out over and over and over again because I don't want it in between there. But it's really hard to pull it out by the roots because it has little bulbs down to the bottom. So chives is another herb that I use. Now down here is an herb that I let reseed itself all over my garden, and I use it extensively. This is dill. This dill reseeded itself from earlier this year, and it's just kind of growing in just, you know, a late fall crop of it. It's kind of all through this bed here. Because I let it reseed itself, you know, I didn't pull off the seed heads. They're along with my purslane. Now I do not allow purslane really to grow in my garden. I need to come through and weed again. But yeah, purslane could also be counted as an herb, but I don't purposefully allow this to grow. It just is, it's too rampant and too invasive. I know people eat it and love it, and it can be counted as an herb. So yes, I guess I can say I grow purslane, but I wish I didn't. So anyway, there's more herbs. Now here's this last summer's dill. I haven't pulled this out yet. Seeds have all dropped down on the ground and they're going to sprout. So that'll make next year's planting. I have not planted dill since my first planting. I just let it reseed itself and it continually comes up. It does prolifically reseed, and I have not found that to be an issue because once it gets a little bit taller, it's easy to remove the ones that you don't want. The other reason I grow dill is it is an amazing pollinator attractor. It brings in all the little hoverflies and parasitic wasps, just everything you really want in your garden. So dill is a fantastic herb to grow. I use the entire plant. You can dry the leaves. You can use the seeds. The stalk is great for the compost. So it's an amazing plant to have in the garden. So I don't mind if it reseeds itself like the salad burnett. Poor salad burnett. Not loved. This down here is my garden thyme. It's in a corner of my garden bed. This one can reseed itself also. This little guy right here has reseeded itself outside of the garden bed. I probably should have deadheaded them, but you know, I don't mind if it reseeds because it doesn't reseed prolifically. Thyme can be dried. It can be used in all sorts of meals, and it's just a great plant. I'm sure there's medicinal uses for it, but I've never used it medicinally. So thyme is another easy one to grow. Now, I've tried growing this like the other garden herbs outside of my raised beds, and this is the only one since 2007 when I moved here that has survived outside of a garden bed. They seem to need the richer soil for some reason. And this area, it gets the same water as the rest of the bed and seems to do just fine. There's many different varieties of thyme too, but this is the only one that I've been growing, and it's just the regular English thyme. Now we're here with my basil plants. I always grow a few basil plants, and as you can see, I've cut them back. I cut them back and just dry them on my counter, put them on top of my microwave. I have not put them in my dryers yet because they dry so quickly. And what I do with them is, I remove all the little leaves, stuff them in a bottle, and then I rub them in between my hands, pull out any little sticks. That's how I get my dried basil. So I just dry the leaves whole. Now here's my African blue basil. I don't use it as an edible plant, but I use it to attract pollinators. They absolutely draw in tons of pollinators. Now this is an overcast, cooler day, so I'm not seeing too many on it now, but usually it's absolutely covered. Down here is an experiment that's not going well. We're going to see if it overwinters and comes back, but this is tarragon. I have never grown tarragon. I did use a little bit of it in some cooking, and it was really good, but we're going to see if this comes back. If any of you have any suggestions on tarragon and how to grow that, let me know. This gets, all the same water as the tomatoes and the basil. I don't know if it would do better in a drier area or a more moist area, if it likes rich soil or not rich soil. I haven't done a lot of research on tarragon, so if you could let me know the best way to grow it, that would help. Now over here, trying to hide behind a pepper plant, I have one of my favorite herbs for scent, and this is marjoram. Marjoram can be used in soups and stews, and it is a tender annual here in Utah, so it just gets replanted every year. And in Southern California, when I grew it, it was a perennial. So it's just a tender perennial that I absolutely love, and I try to always have a little bit of it in the garden, mostly so I can run around and smell it as I pass. So this is a great one. So here we are in my area underneath my peach trees. All my peach trees have been harvested, and we have every herb that wants to grow by itself can just grow. So I have a ton of parsley. I just let parsley reseed itself. I do dry the parsley. I use it in cooking. It's just a very versatile plant. It's the host. Let me pull this dead dill out of the way so we can see here more. Parsley is a host for the swallowtail caterpillars, but I haven't seen any on my plants. But it's so remote out here that it's not remote. It's not an area that I go through very often. But you can see how heavily it reseeds itself. And I do use it a lot, so I don't mind that it reseeds itself, and it makes a great ground cover. So right over here, let's see if we can get you in a little bit closer. There's a parsley plant about ready to reseed itself. It's got the flowers on it. It draws in pollinators, and it's great at doing that. Maybe if I can get up again, I will take you in and give you a little closer look. But I let that reseed itself and let it grow as many parsley plants as it wants to. Now parsley is what's called a biennial. This is a first-year parsley plant right here, where it's just growing the leaves. And the one that's flowering was from last year. So the second year it reseeds itself, and then it dies, and then you get the new parsley coming up. So let's see if we can get myself off my raised garden bed and get you a little closer here. As you can see, the flowers are quite pretty. It's having a hard time focusing, but that's a great little plant. Here's some oregano that's reseeded itself here. Now I will probably pull this out because oregano can be very aggressive if it starts reseeding. So I always deadhead the oregano before it reseeds and pull it out if I see it where I don't want it. We also have an Echinacea that reseeded itself up here. This is another beautiful garden plant that can be used as a medicinal plant. The entire plant is medicinal, including the roots. So I do not usually let Echinacea reseed itself because it can be pretty aggressive too. But so I end up cutting off the flowers. It's a real balancing act to allow it to seed enough to feed the birds, but not enough to spread itself all over my yard and make more work for me. So I do love letting Echinacea grow. Now another plant that's a prolific reseeder that I think I've probably done myself in with is lemon balm. This lemon balm has reseeded itself from plants that are down below next to my house, which my house is way over there. So you can see how easily it reseeds itself. And it is all through this area. There's tons of lemon balm all through here. But this is another one that, you know, I've just kind of started to allow to go because the pollinators do love it. It smells fantastic. And it does grow in a clump and doesn't spread too heavily. So, you know, it's easy to go in and pull out the seedlings that I don't want. So lemon balm is great for teas. You can dry it. I don't use it that often, but I do love to just sniff it as I go by. It's part of the mint family. Now down here are the remnants of another herb that I grow, and I grow it in two different ways. This area right here is covered by garlic. I just let garlic grow around my fruit trees. I usually don't go for garden myths and doing things that are not really scientifically accurate, but this is one that I do, and I feel that it works. I'm probably, you know, I could be wrong, but it's supposedly, if you let garlic grow around the base of your trees, you can avoid the borers that come in at the base. Now, I've had a few borers, but these trees are probably, well, they were planted in 2008. So they're older peach trees. They still bear prolifically. I've never sprayed for borers. Don't tell Dano on that because that makes him upset. But they do seem to do well. And I have not had a huge borer issue. Matter of fact, this tree is the only one that ever gets borers, and it's like every other year it'll get one borer in it, and I just get rid of it and it's done. This tree has never had borers. This tree right here did have borers before I put the garlic in, but it hasn't had them since. So this is one way I grow garlic. The other way is to plant them in my garden beds for harvest, and I have a lot of garlic videos, you know, on how to grow them. So those, I'll link those at the top and at the bottom too. And it's about time to plant my garlic in my garden beds. That happens in October. Now another herb that I grow a lot of is lovage. Can see, let's see if I can show you the stalks down at the base. They look a little bit like celery. They smell exactly like celery, only they're a little, the flavor and the smell is a little stronger. And I just found out that the seeds can be used like celery seed. I always remove the seeds because they reseed themselves prolifically everywhere. And now I think I'm going to start harvesting the seeds so I can grind them up for, you know, to use like celery seed. So they're amazing plants to grow. I don't know if they can be dried. I'll have to look that up and see, but I've always just used them fresh. And a little goes a long way, so they're great plants. Now another one that I let reseed itself prolifically up here and all through my garden that I did a video on, and I'll show you that, I'll link that video up, and I'll link that video up at the top and at the bottom, is coriander. Now the coriander is gone. I did allow it to reseed itself up here and in my garden beds, but it doesn't seem to come up until the next spring. So it's very easy. I never plant it. It just plants itself. And coriander, I don't like the leaves. I'm one of those people who are genetically predisposed to think the leaves taste like soap. I love it for the seeds. You know, so coriander is cilantro when it's the leaf, and coriander when it's the seed. I use the seeds. The other benefit of coriander is the flowers are huge attractors of pollinators. The pollinators absolutely love those. So I let them grow everywhere they want to in this yard. Now another tea plant that you can't see anymore because I cut it back because it was done is this little guy right here, and this is bee balm. I think I'll see if I could find a picture that I took earlier and put it up on the screen. But bee balm fills this whole area, brings in the pollinators, and the leaves can be used as tea. So there's another herb that I use. Another edible herb that I grow is lavender. Now this lavender is done with its flower heads, but you can use them, you know, the way I love to use lavender is, you know, to dry the seed heads. There's, you know, it's really hard to find nylon stockings anymore, but to soak in to soak it in your warm bath water, turns the bath water purple, and the scent is very relaxing. So you can also use lavender in cooking. Lavender is very easy to grow. It does not like wet feet. It likes well-draining soil and a lot of heat. and very little moisture. So lavender is another great one to grow. So here's an herb in my front yard that I'd like to showcase, and it's one of my favorite ones. Now this is my Vitex Agnus Castus, or chase tree. Now I used to have one, and I'll link the videos above and below from how I grow them and then why it died. But I used to have one that was as tall, actually a little taller than my 9-bark back there. It was about 8 to 10 feet tall. But this is a new one. This is a Shoals Creek. I think that's the name of it. I'll post it on the screen if it's a little different. But this is my chase tree. Every part of this is medicinal. The most medicinal part is the seeds. Now they use these seeds in medicine for, they're the Vitex Agnus Castus. They use them to regulate your hormones. Now the leaves are also, you can use those in teas. They're also medicinal, but with a little less strong effect, and they smell absolutely fantastic. I love the smell of the leaves. But the best part of the whole bush are the flowers. Now this is September. You can see that they are still flowering, bringing in the pollinators, and they've been blooming since June. Let me show you the back side. Look at all the blooms on the back side. Isn't that gorgeous? So anyway, these are very, very easy to grow. They're very medicinal, very beneficial, and I just think they are fantastic trees. Now I'm going to prune this one up into a tree shape. I'm not going to let it get any taller than about 10 feet tall, but the maximum height they get is about 12. So I'll let it get almost its full height, or at least maybe even 8 feet. I need to be able to prune it without having to get on a ladder. I don't like getting on ladders, but I just wanted to show you the trunk and how well these do. Let me go to the front and you can see the trunk. This is its second year. I planted it last spring. And you can look down there and see how thick that trunk is already. Very healthy, very easy to grow, and I absolutely love them. Vitex Agnus Castus. So thank you for joining with me on this tour of the herbs that I grow in my garden. If you have any questions about them, please ask them below, and I'd love to hear the herbs that you're growing. Maybe there's some herbs that you're growing that I have not grown yet, and I would love to start to grow them. Herbs are one of my favorite things to grow in my gardens. So I hope you have enjoyed this year of gardening. There's still a little bit more left to go, and I hope you have a wonderful garden adventure.